Welcome back. Grades and report cards. They can cause elation or anxiety for both the student and the teacher. Sure, they're not very much fun, but they're very valuable tools in the pursuit of evaluating the quality and the quantity of teacher-facilitated, student-learned knowledge that occurs in our classrooms every day. Starting this spring, there will be some changes made to the grading system and report cards. Here with the good, the bad, and the ugly of the situation is Geoff Sanderson, the Chief Accountability Officer for the Curriculum and Instruction Department of McKinney ISD. Welcome to the show, Geoff.
Hey, thanks.
Glad
Thanks
to
for
have
having
you.
me.
Awesome. Now tell us a little about your background coming into this position. How long have you been in McKinney ISD?
I first started in McKinney in the 2000-2001 school year, and at that time I was a school psychologist and opened up McKinney North High School.
Oh, really? So you were on that campus and you're working in the counselor's office?
Essentially, and that first year what was unique about McKinney North was that it was a 9th grade campus, but then it also housed Scott Johnson Middle School. So we had grades 6 through 8 all in one building, and so it made for a unique start to McKinney ISD for me.
No kidding. And then from there, where did you go?
Yeah, my background, again, was in psychology, and so after 2 years at the campus, I moved over to central office and worked in special populations department. I did that, and then part of my formal training dealt with statistics and research and standardization, and so it lended itself to moving into state assessment and student assessment program. And so it's just kind of been an evolution, I guess, the last several years for my work and working with student achievement data and other performance metrics.
Wow. Well, so you do a lot of like people watching, a lot of observing and collecting data.
Yeah, and I'm more comfortable with more quantitative measures, but we certainly need to take into consideration the qualitative aspects and being able to figure out what is going to give us the best piece of information as we will look at all of the various data that we have available to us at the schools.
That's excellent. Can you tell us a little about your home, your family?
Sure. I've been married for 14 years now. We have 2 kids, both boys. One's in kindergarten and one's in 2nd grade, and so they're now in both schools, and so that was a good thing, I think, for us. My wife works over at Slaughter Elementary, and so we've been connected with McKinney ISD for a while now. So it's good stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. What does your wife teach?
She's a paraprofessional in the music classroom.
Oh,
so she works, and her background was in fine arts. That was her degree, and so now she is able to work in the classroom with the kids on a part-time basis, and then also spends a lot of time volunteering at our kids' elementary school and making sure she keeps an eye on them while they're there.
So they go to Slaughter?
They're actually at Valley Creek, and so she has to juggle.
Oh, okay, I see.
So she's working essentially 2 campuses and being able to keep eyes on little friends at both places.
Mm-hmm. That's great. Well, it sounds like what you do and certainly what we're going to talk about today have a big impact on what goes on the campuses. I mean, it's not just a central office issue that we're going to talk about today. What is it that our state legislator has mandated as of 2011?
Right. House Bill 3 is what we're starting to feel the implications of, and it was a very broad piece of legislation, and one of the larger components of House Bill 3 was to overhaul the state assessment program. So
which was the tax test.
The tax test.
Previously.
So it actually, we've been tax testing for 9 years, and now they've implemented a brand new state assessment program, and so that was a huge component when they introduced the STAR test, and it's the acronym for State of Texas Assessments of Academic Readiness. It's a 3 through high school program, and so what we used to have in grades 3 through 8, where we would tax test each of the grade levels and various subjects, they now have STAR counterparts. And then at the high school level, they've developed 12 end-of-the-course exams that are connected to specific courses that students would be enrolled in. So part of that we'll talk about here in a little bit also is that they mandated at the high school level that those end-of-the-course exams count for 15% of students' grades, which is first time that we've had an actual state assessment that is now counting for students' grades, and then subsequently it has implications for credit accrual for their GPA and their rank, and so forth. So a lot of implications that we're having to deal with right now.
And I want to stress that you're the messenger.
That would be a good thing to stress. Yes.
I mean, you're certainly open, I'm sure, to parents and students, community members sending you an email or question or phone call saying, okay, explain this a little bit more to me. But this is the big deal, is the fact that this 15% is now going to affect students' grades, that the end of course exam, that it is a state assessment like the tax was previously, but now it directly affects students' grade point averages.
Correct. Correct. I mean, I think it's always been high stakes, all of these tests. And when we introduced them, even with tax tests, we had in one time where third graders had to pass a test to go to fourth grade, fifth graders had to pass to go to sixth grade, eighth graders had to pass to go on to high school, and then your high school students had to pass 4 tests in order to be eligible for graduation. Well, they haven't really shied away from high stakes. If anything, it's become much more intense now. So we still have those promotional tests. So fifth graders are going to have to pass these new STAR tests to be eligible for sixth grade, eighth graders. Likewise, will have to pass in order to go on to high school. But now what we're seeing at the high school level in particular is that they're accountable for 12 end-of-course exams. And as you pointed out, in addition to that, those 12 end-of-course exams have implications for their grades locally that they're taking.
So now at the elementary level where they have that 4-point scale, you're not going to see any sort of percentage that affects the grade point average. When we get into middle school, will there be a connection as far as the
It is
EOC?
for the middle school students that are taking high school courses that have end-of-the-course exams. And so,
but not the STAR test at the middle school level. That won't have any impact on their grade.
Correct.
It would have to be a high school class that a middle school student was taking.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. And it really, the reason why that's going to be an implication is because those middle schoolers that are taking high school classes, those are transcripted courses. So when you take Algebra 1 as an 8th grader, for an example, that really is part of your high school graduation program. And so it would count in that instance as 15% of your grade.
Since you're a data math guy, I mean, you understand statistics, can you kind of explain to us now what does that look like? Maybe we should pull up the grade card image. What does it look like for the students now when they're seeing their grades at the end of, because we're in January,
right.
They've only seen their first quarter grades. Right, okay, so we've got quarter 1, quarter 2 on the far left side of the screen.
We're in first semester grades that we'll have. And so what you see on this example now that's new, this is actual report card. It illustrates the 2 new columns that are appearing on students' report cards that we mail out. And it has an EOC1 and an EOC2, and that's kind of a placeholder for those students that are going to be taking a course that has an end-of-the-course exam requirement. And so that's going to be new for them. And for this first semester, the end of the course would suggest you don't take it till the end of the year. And so the hard part for us is that we have to have that placeholder there, even though the students won't test until this spring. And when we get the results back, we're going to have to be able to apply that end of the course exam into their first semester. So it has to count 15% of that semester grade, and then it would also be populated into that second EOC2 column.
So traditionally the quarter 1, quarter 2, those were summative, formative assignments that the teacher gave the students, and those grades were calculated from that. Then the exam 1 column was the final test for that quarter,
right.
That the teacher gave. And then now this EOC is a test that the state has developed, the STAR test, but is an EOC component. Or is it it's the same test. It is
Correct.
The STAR test, but it's going to have a different grade than your last exam grade in quarter 2.
It does.
And we want to point out too that we're looking at a 9th grade student's grade card over there on the far right. It says 09, because this is just beginning with students that are taking 9th grade high school courses. It's not affecting students that are in 10th, 11th, or 12th grade.
That's correct. The phase-in period for House Bill 3, when they introduced it, was that for entering ninth graders for the 2011-2012 school year. So for this year, our original ninth graders, first time to be in ninth grade, are the first class that has EOC testing obligations. So for any child who is currently in 10th, 11th, 12th, or repeating ninth grade, they were grandfathered in under the tax program. And so as we phase in, this year's ninth graders will really feel the brunt, and most of them will be taking at least 4 end of the course exams that are connected to their 4 core classes. And then going forward, they'll have another 8 that they'll have to complete between 10th grade and 11th grade.
Can you do just a little bit of comparison, so kind of give us an idea of what these tests will be like to the tax test? We kind of talked about that, but is there any other like big differences between the 2 tests now?
There's several. The
good ones, I'm sure. All of them good.
It's a more rigorous test across the board, and that was part of the intent of the new statute, was to develop a more rigorous state assessment program. And so we know that going into it. We know that the complexity of the items is going to be much more difficult than the students have seen. There's going to be changes in the writing components. Students are now being asked to have 2 writing samples as opposed to historically having 1. Another big change is we know that there are time limits. Historically, the tax test and its predecessors were untimed tests that were administered, and the notion there was they were trying to determine what the students knew, and so time was not part of that indicator. But now we know every test has a 4-hour time limit, with rare exception depending on special circumstances. And so that's a logistical hurdle that we're having to accomplish, not only procedurally, but also with our students, being able to prepare them that it is not untimed no longer. And so those are some of the things that we're really seeing that are much different. The obvious at the high school level is they now have what amounts to a comprehensive final that's been state developed, and so it's common across Texas and for all students that are going to be enrolled in any of those 12 end of the course exams. And so that's a big shift, not only in the state, but it also has implications for us, for those students who unfortunately might have to retake the test if they're not successful the first time. And so depending on the time in which they take to retest, they're going to be receiving new content as they move forward in the grade levels, but still having an obligation on some of that legacy content that they were exposed to.
Wow. When you mention complexity of the items, you're talking about individual questions, vocabulary, and just wording within a question. That's good stuff for students to know, to be prepared for walking into it, because of course they're concerned about their GPA. Right. And they want to make sure that they are making good grades. I guess it might be useful for students and teachers to look at the state of Texas website and maybe get a little bit more specific information about well, I think one of the things I'm going to look up is
right.
who is establishing and who's writing the courses, because I'd be worried about giving my students a comprehensive final, but now I'm giving them a comprehensive final that I didn't write, and so you've got a lot at stake there, like you said before, which I understand completely. The state of Texas is really trying to raise the bar, and we got a lot on our hands. I think McKinney ISD has shown that they are well equipped to handle something like this, but it's going to take some time, I think, to see how to adjust.
I think that from my perspective, we're certainly well positioned. I think we're well prepared for the new assessments, but the reality is all of our kids aren't going to score 100% on these exams. The intent of the exam itself was to reestablish a normative distribution in the scores. And so as I mentioned, we were in our 9th year of tax, and so we've gotten very good at tax testing. And so I think part of the intent of the legislators was to kind of establish a new bar and a new metric in order to reevaluate the efforts of school systems and really, I think, to foster that continuous improvement. And so there's certainly philosophical arguments that you can make on both sides or many sides of the state assessment arena, but I think that the intent of the legislators when they developed the law was ultimately for continuous improvement with our students.
Absolutely. Well, it was very nice to meet you, and I am so glad that you were here to help me understand some of the math involved. But I don't envy some of the questions that you're probably going to encounter as we continue through this. I'm sure the biggest amount of it is going to come right at the end of this particular school year. So I wish you well with that and with giving feedback. So thanks again for being on the show, Geoff.
Appreciate it.
Stick around. We're going to do McKinney ISD famous lookalike. This is where we make a photo comparison between a celebrity and a person from McKinney ISD who may or may not look like a celebrity. Honestly, who are we kidding? I mean, there's no chance. All right, roll them. Cameron Diaz, The Mask, that was like 100 years ago. Tiffany Collett, Partners in Education, that's awesome. I love the hair and the smile, that was perfect. Thanks again, Geoff. Incidentally, if you think you have a good candidate for McKinney ISD Famous Lookalike segment, and by good we mean you know someone in McKinney ISD who even just slightly resembles a famous person, we don't care. Let us know at met@mckinneyisd.net. That's it for today's show. Thanks for joining us. On the next episode of Studio M, we'll take a closer look at STAR testing and what it means for the district, and we'll visit with a young lady from Evans Middle School with a compassionate forte for fundraising. We'll see you next time in the studio, Studio M, your McKinney ISD talk show.